Within each and every one of us. And as we are celebrating Easter today, we also know that this is the season of the earth, and today begins Earth Week. Tomorrow is Earth Day. And we always take the time to remember our responsibility as stewards and caretakers of the earth. And I want to share this reading with you before we pray. We stand at a critical moment in Earth's history, a time when humanity must choose its future. As the world becomes increasingly interdependent and fragile, the future at once holds great peril and great promise. To move forward, we must recognize that in the midst of a magnificent diversity of cultures and life forms, we are one human family and one earth community with a common destiny. We must join together to bring forth a sustainable global society founded on respect for nature, universal human rights, economic justice, and a culture of peace. Toward this end, it is imperative that we, the peoples of the earth, declare our responsibility to another, to the greater community of life, and to future generations. So in this moment, our prayer champion, Nick Bullitt, will lead us in prayer.
Good morning, celebration. Happy Easter. Let's just take this moment to just settle and relax into this space. Everyone, please close your eyes and take a deep breath in and release. Just sigh it out. And another breath in and release. What I know is that there is one spirit, one energy, one life force, and it is called by so many different names. And in this moment, I choose to call it God. I choose to call it infinite love and light. I choose to call it all-encompassing spirit. And this God is all wisdom, all knowledge, all love, and all presence. This is the experience of God permeating through all of life. God is the experience that created all of the sun and the moon and the stars, the clouds, the experience that is breathing life in and out and all around us. And right here, right now, I know that I am one with that one and only universal force. I am one with that universal consciousness. I am one with that divine love and light. So right here and right now, we celebrate the experience of Christ consciousness. We stand in the light of Christ consciousness. Today is a day of rebirth. Today is a day of awakening. Today is a day of remembrance. So right here and right now, just call out your I ams. Call out the truth that you know about yourself. I am light. I am love. I am peace. I am prosperous. I am joy. I am light. I am bliss. I am all of these things. Yes, all of these things and more. All of these things and more. We just give thanks for this day. We give thanks for celebration. We give thanks for the experience that is Christ consciousness today. And so right here and right now, I release this prayer back into source, back into cause where it is already met and received. And together we say, amen. Amen. Ashe. Ashe. So it is. And so it is.
We are here now. Yes, yes.
Because you're already sinless. You were created that way. When God created you, he didn't make a mistake. He didn't keep a list of mistakes that you're holding. He said, it said, love said, I know what I'm creating and it is perfect, whole, and complete. Love said, I know what I'm creating and nothing ever can be held against it. Love said, it is already done in the image and likeness of love. Take that.
here, welcome home. If anything, mistakes are for correction, not punishment. Welcome here, welcome home, because we celebrate you unconditionally, the love of God that flows from you unconditionally. And we also believe that everything is spiritual, right? And that would include your cell phones. So, spiritualize your cell phone. Well, Pastor, what does that mean? That means put your phone on vibrate. But if something moves you, touches you, put it out there on Facebook and Twitter. Let people know where you are in consciousness. Of course, the miracle says that all minds are joined because there is only one mind. And if something impacts you, it has the ability to impact others. So put it out there. And we want to keep in touch with you. So if you receive one of these blue connection cards, please turn it over and fill it out. Email address, drop it in with your offering, and we'll put it on our mailing list. Year 6 is what we're aiming at now. And it's going to be amazing. When Pastor Gray and I said yes to this thing we're currently co-creating, we said we wanted to create a place that felt like home. So when you come to this place, you're never a visitor. If anything, you're a guest. A guest is if you came into our home, in our hearts. First time you come, you're a guest. When you come back, you're family. First time you come, you're a guest. When you come back, you're family. So I'd like to acknowledge all of our first time guests. Please stand briefly. First time guests.
Gets into your brain easier, and it becomes sort of an automatic response. So one of the things that I do, I listen to a series of affirmations every day. There's subliminal recordings that I listen to. And one of the recordings, there's an affirmation in there that says that I know that the things that I seek will find me in the right time, in the right place, in the right way. I love that affirmation because it's absolutely true. And it puts us in a place of being able to kind of just chill out, right? Because so often when we're trying to create something or we want to manifest something or we want to attract something, we're looking for it, we're watching it. It's like if you planted a seed, we're talking about seeds and soil and planting this month. So when you plant a seed, and then you go back 2 days later and dig it up to see what's happening with the seeds. Like, so often that's what we do when we're trying to create or manifest something. And when you understand that it will find you in the right way, in the right place, in the right time, you don't have to keep digging up the seed. But here's the other half of that. You must also understand that we are eternal broadcasting stations. And so the signal that we're sending out is what's matched by the universe. And it will find you. But many times, we're not aware of the signal that we're sending out, right? We desire wealth, we desire money, we desire a new relationship, we desire a better career, all of these different things, a new home, a new car. But we are actually projecting out the energy of fear. We're actually projecting out the energy of doubt. We're projecting out the energy of worry. And everything you seek, it finds you, right? It responds to that vibration. So it's important that we understand as we celebrate this truth, which is a powerful truth, that it will find you. You got to be clear about what you're broadcasting. Yes, yes? Yes. So let's celebrate this truth. It will find you. It will find you.
Find One thing you'll learn about CSC is that our vision, mission, and purpose guide everything that we do. Our vision. Celebration Spiritual Center is a God experience that turns on the heart, mind, and soul of the world. A God experience is the realization of oneness that transcends material sense. Our mission and purpose is to awaken the world to the presence of God within and all around us. To celebrate this truth as one family, embody unconditional love, equip humanity to live our greatest lives, and to serve all creation. The centering thought for meditation this month is, I rest in the arms of God. And the song is, Rest in the Arms of God. We continue the April message series, the seed, the soil, the tree, the fruit, making sense of manifestation. Pastor Greg's topic today is Beyond Your Lifetime. It's time for your CSC news and updates. Let's spread the word about CSC. Today, we're going to try a new way to invite all of our friends to church at once. If you have your spiritualized smartphone with you, take it out and open your Facebook app. Now, tap Check In. Select Celebration Spiritual Center. And then type a status if you want to. And click Post. And just like that, you let all of your friends know about CSC. Now come get clarity about what's going on in your life. Join us today after service. Pastor Greg and Pastor Yolanda are here to support you in applying what you learn at CSC to your daily life experiences. Join us today at 1 p.m. for the God Talk. No question is off limits. Now, reminder to new and current members. New members, please complete your membership agreement form and Magnificence inventory by April 28th. Current members, please return your annual renewal by April 28th. Now, CSC's annual Baby Blessing Celebration will be held on Mother's Day, May 12th at 10 a.m. If your child is 3 years old or younger and you would like to participate in our ceremony, sign up at the member services table or go to celebrationsc.org/baby and complete the form by April 28, 2019. The ceremony is free for all active members. Non-members can also participate at a cost of $150 per child. If you have questions, please see Pastor Greg or Pastor Yolanda. The Momentum Prayer Call. It's better than your morning coffee. Pastor Greg, Pastor Yolanda, and our prayer champions pray with us and for us every Wednesday morning at 7 a.m. Start your day by knowing the truth of who and whose you are. Call details can be found at the host services table, on our website, and on social media. Connect with us this Wednesday. We promise it's better than your morning coffee. Now text again. It's fast, easy, and secure. Text your dollar amount to 347-744-9500 and follow the prompts. Minimum donation is $10. Again, that number is 347-744-9500. Try it out today. Now just a few housekeeping reminders. Food and drink is not allowed in the sanctuary except for water. However, please make sure that that water is covered. Also, no audio or video recording is permitted during service. And now we have an announcement from Pastor Greg and Pastor Yolanda. But before that, I want to say thank you for celebrating with us. Happy Easter, and we'll see you next week.
Woo!
Good morning again, everyone. As we are, of course, celebrating Easter, and we know that Easter has a lot to do with Jesus. And one of the things that we know about Jesus is that he healed people, right? You know, we read the stories, we've heard the stories. He, blinded eyes were open, and the lame walked, and the dead rose, right? We heard all these wonderful things. And unfortunately, what has happened, because we've heard these stories about Jesus, Jesus has become a great exception, right? This idea that Jesus is the only one that can heal, or you can only be healed by the name of Jesus, or somehow using Jesus as a channel. Well, that's actually not true. And one of the things that I want to share with you all is why that's not true and how you can become your very own healer. I'm excited to let you know that the next round of 90 Days to Greatness will be starting at the end of the month on Monday, April 29th. 90 Days to Greatness, Healthy Mind, Healthy Body. What's absolutely true about life is what takes place in our mind affects what happens in our physical body, what happens in our financial body, what happens in our career body, what happens in our relationship body. And so when you have a healthy mind, then all of the bodies that make up your life and make up who you are can also be healthy. And so we're going to be studying the work of Dr. Joe Dispenza, using his powerful text, You Are the Placebo, and moving through a process. One, understanding what's actually happening, why healing is real and happens all the time. If you think that it was just something that happened in the Bible days, I invite you to just Google spontaneous remission. There's a journal that's actually cataloging over and over again all of the ways that people are healed, and basically doctors can't explain it, so it's just called spontaneous remission. People are healing all over the world. And so tomorrow night, I'm going to be doing a webinar to take you through some of the steps of what that's all about. And if you want to join me in the class, then you'll learn tomorrow night how to enroll for the class. If you're actually interested in taking the class right now, you know you want to be a part of it, you can register today. We have the iPads at the member services table. You can go to our registration page and register for the class. Any other questions you have, please come see me directly, or again, join me tomorrow night. If you're on our mailing list, you will get the info. It will be posted on social media as well, and we'll make sure we get it out to you. It's going to be absolutely amazing. You can become your very own healer.
Just very quickly, 50 Days to Fearless Living is the course that I am teaching starting on Wednesday. Show of hands, anyone that's been in 50 Days to Fearless Living? Anyone that's going to take 50 Days to Fearless Living? If you have any questions about the class, 50 Days to Fearless Living, I've been a teacher of the Course in Miracles for 17 years. And when I began to do my annual restudying of the text and of the workbook lessons, you'll hear us reference A Course in Miracles a lot at CSC. I realized that those first 50 lessons in the workbook, if you got those lessons, that foundational teaching that was in there, that you could become fearless that you would realize and recognize your connection to the source that we speak of, and that you would live differently on the earth. And so, the class will begin Wednesday night. It is an in-person class. I like to teach up close personal. It's an in-person class, 12-week class. If you're interested to get more information, see anybody that raise their hand, they can tell you about the class, or you can come see me directly. Wednesday night here in Restoration Plaza. If you'd like to sign up, go out to the registration, out to the host table and sign up there, or www.celebratioSC.org/register. All right? Looking forward to Wednesday night's class. I'll be proud. We have come to the time in our service that we call the meditation experience. What we've learned over the years is not just how much information you glean from countless texts. It is about this idea that God is internally felt. It's a felt reality. It's not just an intellectual exercise. And when you tap into this awareness of love's presence deep within you, you begin to realize that you're supported in ways that you never imagined. But in order to feel that connection, you've got to tap in. It's not out there, it's within you. And it's within you all the time. So we take time to meditate, to bring our minds and our bodies to this present moment, and to feel the love of God within us now. We can rest in this understanding. We can rest in the knowingness that we're loved and held and supported and never judged. We can rest in the awareness that we are worthy beyond measure, that we were born worthy. We can rest knowing that whatever challenges we have support that we need to move through those. We can rest. And so we're going to take that time to rest today. So let's go ahead and bring your feet to the floor. And allow your back to rest against the chair. And maybe this is the first time this week that you've really had a chance to allow yourself to rest. It's more than a physical rest, it's a mental, emotional, and spiritual rest. We're always running, always doing, always thinking about what needs to be done. And right now, we just want to rest in this idea. If you could anthropomorphize God, if you could come up with an image for God and see it as a loving presence in your life, who would that be? What unconditional loving presence would you find? Do you know? Have you experienced? Call that individual to mind. Maybe it is a physical location that enables you to rest. Maybe it's your bed or your home. Wherever it is, you feel safe. Call that place, that image, that person to mind. And see them there, or see that location. And settle into that location, knowing that you're physically held here. Feet on the floor, relax the feet. If you're holding anything in your hands or in your lap, go ahead and place that to the floor and relax. The ankles relax. Knowing that the feet are holding us. We send the energy of relaxation up our shins and calves, and those muscles relax. Energy flows across our knees, and as we bend the knees, we bow down to the truth within us that love is here. And allowing that energy now to flow up each channel, each chakra, activating it, balancing it. As it crosses those chakras and flows out the crown of your head, an opening occurs. And we allow this energy to flow back down through our body. Sending relaxation down our arms. And out the palms and out the fingertips. We feel this gentle breeze of connection. And from this place, we're going to begin to breathe. Just breathe. Inhaling up through our low belly. Inhale. Hold it there. Open the mouth and release. Beautiful. Inhale again. All the way up through the rib cage now. Both sides, front and sides and back of the body. Hold it there. Open the mouth and release. Beautiful. Inhale all the way up through the heart now. Hold it there. And release. Beautiful. One long inhale all the way up through the heart. Hold it there. And release. And this last time, breathing in and up through the heart, hold it there. This time, close the lips and exhale through the nose, slowly, relaxing each muscle. Throat relaxes, chest relaxes. This is the way we will breathe for the remainder of our meditation, in and out through the nose. Taking long, slow breaths. Bringing your focus now inward to the heart space, the heart chakra. Bring to mind that person or that place, maybe even a pet. And feel the energy of that love. It represents the love that God is. Allow it to fill your body. Allow it to breathe in your body. And as we sing these words, you just relax in the comfort of that love. Knowing that as you breathe, you are breathing the breath of God right now. And you can rest. Breath of God is breathing me right now. Right now. The light of God is filling me right now. Right now. The love of God is holding me right now. Right now. I rest in the arms of God. The breath of God is breathing me right now. Right now. Breathing you. The light of God is filling me right now. Filling you. Right now. The love of God is holding me right now. Right now. I rest in the arms of God. Let your worries rest. Let your heart rest. Let your body rest. Let your mind rest. Let the past rest. Let the future rest. Let your worries rest. Let your heart rest. Let your body rest. Let your mind rest. Let the past rest. Let the future rest. Rest in God's love. So as we go into the silence, imagine yourself there loved and supported. Let every thought, every idea, eyes still closed. We hear the music and we hear the innocence of a child. And we remember that that innocence belongs to us as well. That loving presence fills us as well. And from this place of innocence, we just lay down whatever it is. We leave it there for love to heal it, restore it, correct it. And as we sit in this vibration, we allow our lives to be filled with this knowing. It's almost as if we hear those we love just telling us to rest. Let go of what it is that bothers you, frightens you, worries you, and just rest. Just rest.
Just rest, 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 just rest, rest, rest in God's arms.
Just rest there.
Rest, 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 rest,
Feel it
just
just
rest,
right
rest, 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 just rest, rest, rest in God's arms. Rest, 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 just rest, 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 just rest, rest, rest in God's arms.
Start to bring yourself back now.
Rest, 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 just rest,
Slowly start to feel the fingers and the toes.
rest,
Maybe wiggling the fingers and the toes.
just rest, rest, rest in God's arms.
Bring your palms together at heart center.
Rest, rest, rest,
Bow your chin to your fingertips.
rest, rest, rest,
And slowly follow the eyes open, taking a point on the floor in front of you.
rest in God's arms.
Inhale,
Rest, rest,
raise the chin,
rest, just
raise the
rest,
gaze.
rest, rest,
Namaste.
rest, 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 just rest, rest, rest in God's arms.
So one of the amazing things about the resurrection story, if you know this powerful story of Jesus, the stories that it's been told many times in many different ways, we find Jesus on Good Friday. He has gone through this wonderful cycle, right? Where on Palm Sunday he was heralded and the hosannas, and everybody was like, oh, Jesus is coming into Jerusalem. This is so awesome, right? And by the end of the week, they were like, give us Barabbas. They would rather choose a known crook instead of Jesus, this man who only did good. And then, of course, he was crucified. He was executed. He was assassinated, right? And so at that moment, it felt like all was lost, right? The disciples were scared and confused. Anyone who, walked with him or worked with him, some of them denied it because this guy is now disgraced. So you don't want to align yourself with this person that's disgraced. And he's been killed. And you don't know what's going to happen with the movement from there. And one would think that that was the end of the movement. But the beauty of the Jesus story, which is the beauty of the path of the Son, is that that's not how the story ends. Yes, we experience winter. Yes, we experience cold and ice and all of those things. But we know what's coming on the other side of it. We know that spring is coming. We know that the flowers will burst forth again. We know that life is coming again. And so the Jesus story, just as the story of the seasons, they mirror each other perfectly. They're showing us something about our lives. You may feel like all is lost in your life. You may feel like giving up. You may feel like just throwing in the towel. But at the end of the story, you win. Hear the words. Hear this truth. Hear this truth.
Plans you made have not worked out. You want to throw in the towel, but you can't give up now. The book of your life isn't closed. Turn to your next miracle. Access your faith and grab on, because you win.
After all the sleepless nights,
You win.
after all the tears you cried,
You win.
that's how the story ends. You win. Stop beating up yourself.
You win.
Don't you know there's always there? That's how the story ends. You win. Oh.
Can you hold on one more day? Just one moment and your life will change.
Life will change.
Don't leave it up to fate. Life responds to what you say.
Speak the word, have faith, believe. Miracles you will achieve. Open your heart and receive. Receive. You win.
After all the sleepless nights,
You win.
after every single tear you cried, that's how the story ends. You win. Stop beating up yourself, yeah.
You win.
Don't you know there's always hell? That's how the story ends. You win.
The book of your life isn't closed.
The book of your life isn't closed.
See you next
Turn
time.
to your next miracle.
Access your faith.
Access your faith and grab on, because you win.
After all the sleepless nights,
You win.
after all the tears you cried, that's how the story ends. So stop beating up yourself, yeah. Don't you know there's always there? How the story ends. You win. Oh.
We're here to speak life into you. Because I know if you're living, I know that you may be in the moment, or you may have just come out of the moment, where you feel frustrated, where you feel disappointed and you want to give up. But we want to speak that life into you that says that you win, no matter what's happening right now. Life may feel fixed, but you win. Hey. Oh, you win. Turn want to make sure I hear what I'm saying. I'm giving you the end. You may be in the middle right now. I'm telling you how it's going to end. So you can celebrate. So you can get excited right now. That's how it's going to end. That's how it is. You will win. That's how it is. You will win. This is the power of the Easter story. The Easter story is telling us something very profound about our very own life. Not that someone died for our sins because there was something wrong with us, but we had a master teacher, an elder brother by the name of Jesus who demonstrated what was possible for each and every one of us in our lives. And as we look at this story of his life, we can apply it to the circumstances of our life. Well, happy Easter again. Good morning, good afternoon. Welcome. It's so good to be here with all of you, and it feels good up in here, so we're just going to keep that good feeling moving on. As you've already heard, we're in our series, The Seed, the Soil, the Tree, the Fruit, making sense of manifestation. And in week one, we talked about the seed stage, the currency of life. And what I talked about and what we're really looking at, we're using the principle of correspondence, which says, as above, so below, as below, so above. And so what that means is that we can look at things that are here below on the earthly plane, and if we understand how they work, it's teaching us something about how the spiritual plane works. And so when we look at what's happening with the seed, what the seed is and how it works, we're then learning to understand in manifestation what the seed of our minds, which are our ideas and our choices, how they work and how we can use them. And I shared a lot of that message. I invite you to go. You can go and check the live stream on that. But one of the last things that I talked about in that message was that what's beautiful about the seed is that the seed surrenders to the soil and the sun. In order for the seed to become all that is possible about it, you have an apple seed, we know what's possible for that apple seed. We know the tree that it can become. We know the apple blossoms that can bloom, and we know the fruit that it can produce. And we know the apple pies that can be produced, and the apple cobblers that can be produced, right? All from that one little seed. But it has to surrender itself to the soil. And it has to be willing to become something that it isn't currently. Last week, looking at the soil, looking at that second stage, I asked a question: do you have a fertile mind? Looking at what are the qualities and the characteristics of fertile ground, of fertile soil, do we have a fertile mind? And so we talked about a bunch of wonderful things, including this new word that I love, tilth. Right? Understanding that when we till the soil, looking at the quality of the soil, and if it's fertile, we look at the tilth of the soil. Is it actually even able or capable of receiving seed? So often in our lives, we have many ideas and choices, and there are things that we want in our lives, but our minds are not fertile minds because they're filled with lots of foolishness. They're filled with lots of doubt and fear. They're filled with a lot of thoughts from the world of what you can be, do, or have. But we recognize that a tilthy mind or a fertile mind is a mind that can receive seeds that are new ideas that can then give birth to your life, making it something that it currently is not. So as I was preparing for this message, I had so many different thoughts, but one of the things that came to my mind the other day was I was thinking about how much I love looking at family photo albums. My grandmother in New Jersey, my paternal grandmother, she just has stacks and stacks of photo albums. And no matter what, when I go to my grandmother's house, I love to look at those albums. These are pictures that many times have been looking at since I was a little boy, but there's something about, I feel like every time I look at those albums, I see something different. It's also fun and enjoyable to me as my daughter has gotten older to be able to show her those albums and teach her about family members and different aspects of our family history and where we've come from. And one of the things that I really love about the old pictures is there's something that I can observe. Now, there's always changes, right? You can see, who gained weight and who lost weight. You see changes in clothes, right? What people were wearing in the 50s, 60s, and 70s versus what we're wearing now. But one of the other things that I love to observe when I think about my grandparents' home in Maryland and my grandparents' home in New Jersey, what's fascinating is to see how small the trees and the bushes are. Like when they first bought their homes, I'm thinking about my grandparents' house in Jersey, they have now, right, these huge bushes that are in front of the tree, and even my grandparents' house in Maryland, or in front of the house, these huge bushes. But they were just like as small as my head when they bought the house. They were just these little things. The same thing with the trees. Many of the trees in the backyard and in the front yard, me as a child, I climbed those trees. You couldn't climb those trees when my father was a little boy. You couldn't climb those trees when my grandparents first bought that house. Or I think about the bushes in my grandparents' first yard. That was the bushes that I hid behind playing hide and go seek. You couldn't hide behind those bushes when they first bought the house because they were smaller than any human, even a small child. And as I thought about that, it reminded me of what's so amazing about trees, that they have this power, possibility, and capability to outlast us. And so one of the things that's interesting about trees, they're among the oldest living beings on this planet. Most trees live about 40 to 50 years. There are some species, like the bristlecone pine, which lives 5,000 years. The trees of the Amazon, which I thought was interesting, because we understand this, those of us that live in this northern climate, we know that a tree has rings. And so based on the rings, that's how you can determine the age of the tree. What's interesting about trees that live in tropical climates or even warmer climates like palm trees don't live long. And because of the tropical climates, what happens for most trees that live in a warmer climate, they don't produce rings in the same way. And so for many years, the scientists that studied the trees in the Amazon rainforest didn't think that they lived that long because they didn't see any rings. But what we've come to understand now is that trees in the rainforest actually live 300 to 1,000 years, which is very interesting. And so if you think about it, there are trees that are standing today that were standing when the pyramids were built. There are trees that are standing here today that were standing when the Declaration of Independence was written. There are trees that are standing here today when the first enslaved Africans were brought to the shore and when the enslaved Africans were freed through the Emancipation Proclamation. And there are trees that are standing here today that will still be standing here today when every being that is on this planet right now is gone. And so as I began to look a little bit more into trees, I went to a website that has been very informational for me. It's called gardeningnowhow.com. And on gardeningnowhow.com, they write something interesting about trees. It says, while the elm tree in your backyard won't live that long, it's likely to outlive you and possibly your children. So when planting trees on your property, keep the far future in mind. And that's a teaching right there. When planting trees, keep the far future in mind. And so as we're using the principle of correspondence and understanding as above, so below, as below, so above, then this tells me an important clue that there's something for us to understand. That in order for us to understand this third stage, the tree stage of manifestation, nature is teaching us that as we are creating and that we are co-creating, manifesting requires that we think beyond our lifetime. So I want to share something that I've said in the past 2 weeks because this is important as we're going through this series. As we look at each stage, as we use this series and each message, we are using it to, one, identify which stage we may be currently in related to a desired manifestation. Two, to learn how to maximize and appreciate the good in every stage. And three, to experiment with the process of manifestation, examine our results, and tweak or modify as needed. So as we have moved through these stages, seed, soil, and now we are in the tree stage, what's interesting to me is that the Easter story actually reflects these three stages. It reflects the seed stage, it reflects the soil stage, and it reflects the tree stage. And so I want to take us to Scripture. I want to take us to the Bible, because there's a parable, a short parable that Jesus tells, and we only find this parable in one of the Gospels, in John 12, 23 through 24. And we read this. Jesus answered them, "The hour has come for the Son of Man to be glorified. Very truly I tell you, unless a grain of wheat falls into the earth and dies, it remains just a single grain. But if it dies, it bears much fruit." Now, when we look at many of the different translations, this can just also be called the parable of the seed. You'll read in other translations where Jesus just says, unless a seed falls into the earth and dies, it remains just a single seed. But if it dies, it bears much fruit. And so it's important for us to understand where we are in this moment, in this story as it's recorded in John, as it's written about in John. So this happens, where we are in this verse is just after Palm Sunday. So we have Palm Sunday that happened, that was last Sunday. And again, there's the triumphant entry. Jesus is riding in, or a donkey, or a colt, or an ass, depending on which version you read. And he's riding in, there's the palm trees, and there's the hosannas, right? And so then, according to the story, there were some Greek men that wanted to meet him. And this was his response after the disciples said, "Hey, Jesus, there's some guys that want to meet you." He says, "The hour has come for the Son of Man to be glorified. Unless a grain of wheat falls into the earth and dies, it remains just a single grain. But if it dies, it bears much fruit." And so Jesus is doing a number of things here. The first thing we have is Jesus is foreshadowing what's going to happen to him. Right? He's comparing himself to this seed, to this grain of wheat. And he's saying that the grain of wheat must fall into the earth and die. And then when it dies, it actually bears much fruit. He's also using the principle of correspondence, as above, so below, as below, so above. Because he's saying that just like this happens in nature, so it is about to happen with me. But he's also teaching the disciples how this cycle of manifestation and creation actually happens. Now, for those of you, if you want more information about Palm Sunday from a metaphysical perspective, I forgot to share this last week. 2 sermons that you can check out on our YouTube channel. I Get So Emotional is a Palm Sunday message, and Amplifying Your Hosannas, right? So just, again, because I think it's important that we have a metaphysical understanding of what was happening on Palm Sunday. And so as I said in the first week, the seed must surrender to the soil and the sun. And this is what Jesus is talking about when he says the grain of wheat must fall into the earth and die. What actually is true about all manifestation, and again, we understand this, as I just talked about, the apple seed does not look like what it will become. And for most people, if you are not familiar with this whole process of seeds and how things grow, and I showed you an apple seed, and I showed you an apple, or I showed you an apple tree, and I said, this is going to become this, you would think I was a liar. Because there's no way. They're two different things. They're not the same thing at all. But yet the seed contains all of the possibility that that tree is. And so what he is saying here is that, as we understand in nature, the seed must break open. It must go into the soil. And it's really dying. It's because it's leaving, it's the idea of what it is currently. It's leaving that idea and becoming a new idea. That's really all death or transition really is, if we really want to look at it. And so when we're talking about death in this context, this is what we're saying. And so it must fall in the earth and die. But he says something else. He says, if it does not do this, it remains just a single grain, right? He says, unless a grain of wheat falls into the earth and die, it remains just a single grain. Now, what did we talk about in the first week? When we talked about the seed, I said seeds are wonderful, right? Pumpkin seeds are delicious. Right, sunflower seeds are delicious. Quinoa, which is a seed, is delicious. So we recognize that in the seed stage, seeds can be wonderful things. They can be enjoyed in that stage. But if you do not allow that seed to go into the earth and die, it can't become this larger thing. And it can't become this thing which bears much fruit. It can't become this thing that, like a tree, exists beyond our lifetime. And so what's interesting is that a single grain is only good for a single manifestation. It's only good for maybe one lifetime or one stage in your life or one moment in your life. It's good for your 20s or it's good for your 30s, but it's not good in your 50s, 60s, and 70s. And here at CSC, what we're teaching, why we teach from a place of principle, is we're teaching you how to be prosperous for your lifetime and beyond your lifetime, not just how to get something this week. We're not teaching you just how to make it to next month. We're not teaching you just how to make it to next year. We're teaching you the principle, because when you understand that the seed must go into the earth and die, that is how it becomes something that then is a tree that can bear much fruit in season and out of season, and in season and out of season. And so it's interesting to me because there's another piece here. As I said, that this parable only appears in John. There's something else that Jesus says in this text in John that we find mirrored very similarly in the other texts. We find it in Mark and Luke and Matthew. Now here in John, Jesus says, those who love their life lose it, and those who hate their life in this world will keep it for eternal life. And this is also where we get into the idea of take up your cross and follow me. And unfortunately, what's happened is, not understanding that this was a metaphysical principle, many people have taken on that idea that I have to die for Christ, right? Or I have to die for this cause, or die for the gospel. I mean, this is what led, unfortunately, to the Crusades. But we recognize what's happening is, it's this idea of those who love their life lose it. So many of us, we want a different experience of life, but we're in love with and addicted to the current circumstances of our life and are unwilling to go through the process of going into the soil, breaking open, and becoming something different. And so what happens when you remain addicted to life the way it is? See, the thing about it, this is just, I just got to keep it real, right? So, you know, you may want a certain experience, you may want a certain level of success, but you're still talking about how they keeping the black man down, how they don't let women do this and they don't let this person do that. You must change the conversation and plant a different seed in your mind and develop a fertile mind that says that all things are possible for me. You must develop a thought within your mind that says that at the end of the story I win. You must develop a thought within your mind that says, as the ancestor of enslaved Africans who have endured and transformed and transcended beyond all of these circumstances, and here I am now in 2019, I know that I can become anything. I know that I can have anything. I know that I can do anything. But some of us are in love with telling it how it is. And when we're in love with that life, when we're in love with that story, we will lose it. But Jesus says those who hate that life, their life, in this world will keep it for eternal life. Because you plant your seed in the soil, it breaks open, it becomes a tree, and now you have something that lives beyond your lifetime. And so it was interesting to me because it reminded me in 2000 is when I accepted the call to ministry. And at that time, I was still very much in the Pentecostal church, and I was what some would say on fire for God. Come on. There was a book that I loved at that time by a minister named Tommy Tenney, a book called God Chasers, and that was like my mantra, right? Because what was happening for me is I knew that there was something going on that I was being pulled to, and I wasn't satisfied. I wasn't comfortable with how life was. And I wanted something different. And I thought, well, you know, I'm young, and the young people were going to bring this new energy in, and I was the youth minister and all of that. And so I was so serious and so real about it that this idea of dying was so important to me. And so that idea of take up your cross and follow me, it led me to write this song called Ready to Die. I just want to share a little bit with you because it's so where we are, F sharp minor. So, and it had this groove, right? It's kind of like a Bill Withers, Grandma's Hand, no diggity kind of vibe, right? And so, again, what I realize now is that what I was singing was creating my life. By saying that I was ready to die, I was saying that I was ready to become something different. I was ready to give up that story. And I remember I even used this song as we were in seminary. I shared it with my fellow students, and because we were all in that place of ready to becoming something different. I will take my cross and I'll follow you. I'm at your command. Do whatever you want me to. I will be a soldier in your army, Lord. I've got the Holy Spirit and the word's my sword. Oh, I'm ready to die, ready to give up my life. Oh, I'm ready to die, ready to give up my life. So see that vibration? It's not a performance, it's not a performance. That vibration is where we need to get to. Again, unknowingly, I really wasn't fully clear of what it is, but I remember that was just rumbling in my spirit. I'm ready to die. And what I was saying was I'm ready to become something that I'm not. What I was saying is I'm ready to become this man that I am now. In 2000, I couldn't see that. In 2000, I didn't even know about New Thought or the metaphysical path. I wasn't there yet. But there was something that was pulling me, and I was so willing to be pulled by that thing. I was so willing to become something that I couldn't see, that I didn't understand. That's the process, and that's the place that we must come to. And so this is what's being talked about in Scripture. And so in John, as we have that, then again, I say it's echoed in Matthew and Mark and Luke. Almost to the letter we read, for those who want to save their life will lose it, and those who lose their life for my sake will find it. And here's a very familiar passage of Scripture. For what will it profit them if they gain the whole world but forfeit their life? Or what will they give in return? And so we hear that, we know that idea, right? What does it profit you to gain the whole world and lose your soul? This is what it's talking about. Many of us are unwilling to live in the uncomfortable stage that happens when you go from the seed going into the soil, because you go into darkness. I've shared it with you. It was a 7-year journey for me. I stepped away from the church for 7 years. I stepped away from everything I knew. That ultimately ended up in divorce. It ended up with me even being not ostracized from my family. That's not completely true. But I definitely wasn't as cool with my family as I used to be. Right? And I didn't know where it was really going to take me. But I can see it so clearly now that what was happening, I was that seed in the soil, in the darkness, becoming the tree that is now Pastor Greg Stamper. And so again, as I said, seed, soil, and tree are taking us through the Easter story. But what do I mean by that? And I think this is interesting because if we think about our own lives, again, the seed stage is powerful, wonderful, and amazing. But the seeds in the story of Jesus was Jesus' ministry. All the things that Jesus did, feeding of the 5,000 plus women and children, healing the sick, raising the dead, opening blinded eyes, making the lame to walk, teaching, telling stories, telling parables, reaching out and finding disciples and saying, come and follow me, and pulling money out of the mouth of the fish. All of those amazing things that were happening, that was simply the seed stage of Jesus. And if that had only been what he did and he just died, nobody would be talking about him right now. The story would be irrelevant. And why do we know that? Because if you look in Scripture and you look at the book of Acts, you see that the Jewish leaders at that time were talking. Jesus wasn't the only person that was teaching and had a crew of people. You read in the story where they're talking about it. Well, you remember there was this guy named Theudas. Theudas had a bunch of people, and then he died, and then everybody kind of dissipated. So why are we worried about this Jesus guy that just died? So there was a recognition that there were many different teachers. Also, we have the idea where the disciples, we read in the text, the disciples came to Jesus and they said, there are these other people that are also raising the dead and speaking and healing and doing the same things we're doing, right? And basically he says that if we're all doing the same thing, we're brothers, we're in this together, don't bother them, right? So there was a recognition that there were a bunch of other teachers teaching, and there were a bunch of other healers healing. All of that was happening in the time that Jesus was doing what he was doing. So if that's all he did, just like we don't know about those people, we don't even know their names with the exception of Theudas, we wouldn't know his name, we wouldn't be talking about him. But the soil in the life of Jesus is the death and burial. It was that willingness within himself to become more than even the good that he was currently demonstrating. As I said, seeds are good. Sunflower seeds, pumpkin seeds, right? They're beneficial and wonderful as they are. But seeds in just the manifestation of themselves as a seed will never manifest their potential. They will never become something that lasts for a lifetime. And so the resurrection then is the birth of the tree. And it's just the birth of the tree, because even at that stage, we still didn't know what would become of this movement that was known as the Way. We wouldn't know what would become of this ragtag group of people that were hanging out with this teacher from Nazareth named Jesus. We didn't know. But the birth of the tree is the reason that it has gone beyond all of the lifetimes of anyone that walked with Jesus. It has gone beyond the lifetime of Jesus himself. And so when we recognize this, then the recognition of this means that the resurrection is the birth of the Christ. The resurrection is the birth of the Christ, the winner in you. The Christ in you then is the breaker of generational curses. The Christ within you is the breaker of generational dysfunction. The Christ within you is the breaker of generational diseases and ailments, generational brokenness, and generational poverty. Because we realize now that as we allow this thing to take root and be birthed within us and burst forth as this tree, this thing goes beyond our lifetime. So the consciousness that you establish, and this is science, I'll talk about it in a second, but the consciousness that you establish right here and right now in your life will impact your family and future generations. It's literally now a biological fact that the consciousness you hold as a parent is actually imprinted into the DNA of your children. And so what that means then, even vibrationally, even if you're just an auntie or an uncle, when you stand in the vibration of knowing that all is well, when you are an example to your niece and nephew and your little cousins or your friends around the corner or your friends' children, or you're the godmother or the godfather for that child, you are actually impressing their minds with the reality that they can win, with the reality that they can do more than they've seen, with the reality that they can be, do, or have whatever they want, with the reality that the world is their oyster, with the reality that they can travel wherever they want, with the reality that they can go to space if they want, with the reality that they can go to the deepest depths of the ocean if they want, with the reality that they can start any business that they want, with the reality that there is no ceiling, with the reality that they can become millionaires, with the reality that they can give to the planet, with the reality of all of these truths. Because the Christ in us sees, it knows, it imagines, and it creates beyond our lifetime. So we celebrate the resurrection today. We celebrate rebirth today. We celebrate emergence today because we know who and what the Christ is in us. And so the Christ in us is just like the trees of our earth. The trees of our earth have seen kingdoms rise and fall. The trees of our earth have seen good men and women come, and they've seen good men and women go. They've seen the best of humanity, and they've seen the worst of humanity. And yet they remain, they grow, and they thrive through it all. This is the power of the Christ within you. And so I want to leave you with this last thing because it is Earth Day. As many of you know, last spring I had the opportunity to do some ministry training with the Climate Reality Project, and Al Gore and his daughter, Corinna Gore, who she heads the Center for Earth Ethics, and I'll probably be spending some time with them again this spring. And during that training, I was introduced to the River Keepers, a brother by the name of John Lipscomb. The River Keepers it's a powerful organization that was founded in 1966. Their mission is to protect the environmental, recreational, and commercial integrity of the Hudson River and its tributaries, and to safeguard the drinking water of 9 million New York City and Hudson Valley residents. So whether you knew it or not, as New Yorkers, there is an organization, there are a group of conscious people who since 1966 have been making sure that we have safe and clean drinking water, and that our river, the Hudson River, please, I invite you to even go to the website to really read the history of the Hudson River and what it represents as a tributary, and how it works in conjunction with the Atlantic Ocean, and how there are many species of fish that come into the Hudson from the ocean. They come out of the salt water into the fresh water, into the Hudson to actually have their kids, and then they go back into the ocean. And so if the Hudson River is polluted, if the Hudson River has a bunch of plastic in it, if the Hudson River has oil spills and all these things, then it's actually impacting the ocean as well as the river and the drinking water. And so what the River Keepers do, they patrol the river. They patrol the river and they keep it clean. They patrol the river and they help scientists with experiments. They patrol the river and monitor what's going on with the wildlife and the plant life, because all of these are indicators of the health of the system, the ecosystem as a whole. And again, it's protecting the environmental, recreational, and commercial integrity of the river and its tributaries. And so as I met John that day, he said something to us that has stood with me, and it's what inspired this message. As he was talking about climate change and what it is that we are seeking to do and what it is that we need to do, he says it requires people to have an imagination that goes far beyond our lifetimes. Part of what's happening, part of the reason why we're not mobilizing as a human family around climate change is because we're not going to be here when it gets bad. And for all of us, there's a wonderful stat that I read. My daughter was born in 2001. And one of the things that I remember about when we brought Malcolm home that day, she was born in December 3rd, 2001. It was 70 degrees when we brought her home in December. And what's interesting about that particular fact, it aligns with a stat that says that all children born from 2001 forward don't know what normal weather is. Right, now we can think about it. You think about over the last 17 years, the weather hasn't been like it was when you were a kid. You knew it was December, you knew you had to have on a winter coat if you lived in the north, right? You just knew that. It wasn't like a question, oh, it's December, let me see if it's 70 degrees outside today. But from 2001 forward, that's been the reality. But again, even as we've experienced these little things, these changes in the weather, and of course the hurricanes, which we've experienced here in New York, that wasn't a present reality a long time ago. We still don't have an appreciation for what's supposed to happen beyond our lifetimes. And we don't have an appreciation that actually the work that we need to do around climate change, it won't benefit us directly. The mindset that we need to create is the mindset of the tree. A beyond my lifetime tree. a beyond my lifetime consciousness. And what's interesting is when we establish the tree, what does the tree do? And that's why I love that Jesus says it so clear. When he says that if it dies, it bears much fruit. If we plant a tree, if we become in that consciousness of a tree in our minds and in our lives, in the way that we're acting and being and doing, that tree will live beyond us, and it will continue to bear fruit in and out of season over and over again. There will be somebody's mother, there will be somebody's father, there will be a child, there will be a family that will benefit from the seed that you chose to plant in mind. The consciousness of believing and knowing that it is possible to change our planet, that it is possible to heal our planet, that it is possible to get ahead of this climate change thing that's coming, whether we want it or not, that it is possible for us to imagine a world where we have different types of transportation, that it's possible to imagine a world where we're using the power of the sun and the power of the wind and the power of the soil to actually create life and sustain life, that it is possible to develop green jobs, it is possible to develop new industries, it is possible to have people work in ways to move the coal miners from doing those things that are actually harming the earth to now training and retraining them in solar jobs and green jobs, that it's absolutely possible. And not only that, but these jobs will be living wages. I will continue to talk about it, especially this month. If you have not read the Green New Deal, if you have not read what this is all about, it's important. The Green New Deal is not just about saving the planet. The Green New Deal is a plan for a sustainable planet, a sustainable country, and also economic justice. Recognizing that, yes, if we shut down the coal mines, we can't just say to our brothers and sisters that are working on the coal mines, that have been working the mines for generations, and that's a part of their life, that, oh, well, we can't pollute anymore. Figure it out. No, that's not what we do. But we actually recognize that we have the possibility to provide training, to move them into new industries, but not just move them into new industries, but actually give them a true living wage. To make sure that these jobs are jobs that can take care of a family. To make sure that these jobs include family leave that's real, like the countries in Europe have that we don't have. Right? That it includes universal health care, like countries in Europe have that we don't have. That includes universal child care, like countries in Europe have that we don't have. It also looks at the idea, we recognize that actually the least and the lowest, those that are living at the poverty line, are actually the ones that are going to be adversely affected the most by the realities of climate change. So we need to reach and support our brothers and sisters to make sure that they are also moved up. And we're living in this place of equality. But can we imagine that? Because that goes beyond our lifetimes. What's absolutely true is that when the Green New Deal is fully funded and fully in place and all of the components are moving, and the United States is prospering because of it, most of us won't be here. And eventually, as it truly thrives, we will all be gone. But it will be because of the seeds that we planted through our votes. It will be because of the seeds that we planted through our support of our elected officials that are in support of the Green New Deal. It will be the conversations that we come together and are willing to have, to meet at someone's home to talk about what is this climate change thing really all about. The meetings that we come together, the conversations that we have as a community, as a church community. Don't let this Earth Day and this Earth Week just become another platitude. Oh, well, I'll start recycling for a couple months. And don't allow it to even be a place of shame, because that's the other thing, right? You try to guilt people into saving the planet. That doesn't work. That doesn't work. But look at it from this perspective. That nature, the trees are teaching us something powerful. That we have the ability to create beyond our lifetimes. And when you are willing to create a tree, when you are willing to become like the tree, then your manifestations are endless. Your manifestations are endless. No longer are you living in just a single seed manifestation. How can I get to the end of the week? The single seed manifestation. How can I get somebody in the cold side of the bed? Single seed manifestation. How can I get a couple more dollars? couple more dollars or wealth. Wealth is perpetual. And beyond wealth, generational wealth. Right? Single seed manifestation. Cars are wonderful, right? And you may all have your car that you want or the favorite car that you want, or you may be driving it right now. But every car that exists right now that is the most amazing car will become obsolete and a rusty piece of junk eventually. Single seed manifestation, nothing wrong with cars, and nothing wrong with wanting the car, right? I support you in that. But recognize that that's just a single seed manifestation. Recognizing that that's not the thing, right? Because it doesn't produce any fruit. Right. Lord have mercy. A car, stuff, things don't produce fruit. But when you establish this consciousness like a tree, then you produce fruit in and out of season. And then you don't live in the worry place. Because you've established abundance through the tree. I'm done, y'all. Let's finish. As we take a deep breath in, we are grateful and thankful for our planet Earth. We are grateful and thankful for the ways in which we have the ability to look at nature and learn. Learn the deepest wisdom about ourselves, learn the deepest wisdom about the spiritual world and the metaphysical world. I'm so grateful and thankful that we have these living beings on our planet that are thousands of years old. These living beings that have cared for and protected the planet long before we got here. Provided the oxygen that we would need when we arrived. Right here, right now, from my heart, I just express gratitude. Gratitude to every tree on this planet. Gratitude to every tree of our rainforest that literally supplied the oxygen we would need before we arrived. And I am so grateful and thankful for the wisdom that they provide. The wisdom that in consciousness we should and must desire to become like a tree. The willingness to break open the seed in the soil, to plant ourselves firmly in the ground, develop the roots and sprout forth, and become a living thing, to resurrect, to become a living being, to become more than we were in that seed stage, to become more than the possibility that was there, but to now manifest that possibility, and out of that possibility, more fruit, and more fruit, and more fruit, and more fruit is birthed. So here and now, we are choosing to love our planet. We are choosing to become great stewards of this earth. And we are choosing to see beyond our lifetime. As we ask this question within ourselves, the answer will be different for each and every one of us. What is it that I must do for future generations? What are the seeds that I must plant? What are the votes that I must plant? What is the activism that I must begin? What are the marches that I must participate in? Who are the senators that I must write to? What are the truths that I must learn? How must I educate myself so that I am standing in line in consciousness with the future generation that already sees it? Our babies see it. That's why they're protesting. Our babies see it. That's why they're marching to DC and they're there week in and week out. How can I support our babies? How can I align myself with their imagination that sees a world is possible that works for everyone? How can I align with their imagination that sees beyond our lifetime and even beyond their lifetime? And we allow ourselves to be guided by an inspired idea. And collectively, we change our world. So with joy and thanksgiving, I release this prayer now back into the law, which is always in operation. And together we say, amen, amen. Ashe. And so it is. So it is.
You might be in different stages for different things. But know that wherever you are is important to the process, the growth, the end result of winning. This series has the potential to help you move beyond single seed manifestation, to step into your full power, your full knowing, your full knowledge, and live differently on the earth. Thank you, Pastor Greg.
In this moment, we are going to prepare for giving, and I'm going to ask our musicians not to play because I want to make sure that we have everyone's attention. Now, if there's someone, if you need an envelope or you need a pen, please raise your hand because our ushers are happy to serve you. As many of you may have seen, I posted online that I would be sharing something, an announcement during today's service. Now, many of you are aware of what has taken place in the recent weeks, that there was, in this past week, a fire in France, Notre Dame. Part of the church was destroyed. Of course, it will be rebuilt. And we send our love and our prayers to the people of France. And of course, I've seen even many in our community who have shared their pictures of when they were there. Pastor Yolanda was reflecting this week on her time in Paris, having the best crepe she's ever had in her life near Notre Dame. But we also recognize that there's something else that's been going on. Because between March 25th and April 4th, there were 3 century-old historical black churches that were burned in a hate crime in Louisiana. Now, we operate from a place of consciousness, so I'm not going to complain or tell a story. But I'm going to ask myself, what is it that I can do? So what we have decided to do as Celebration Spiritual Center on this day of resurrection is to establish the RISE campaign. And what we are going to do, Celebration Spiritual Center has already pledged $2,000 to put towards the rebuilding of those churches. Our goal is to raise $4,000 or more. So what we are inviting each and every one of you to do is to contribute to this campaign. And this will be an online-only campaign. So you can go to our website, celbrationsc.org/give, or just click the option to give. And you will see there in the giving section, there's a pull down for the RISE campaign. Give whatever your normal offering is, your general donation, but then also you can add another donation and give whatever feels good to the RISE campaign. We're going to do this for 7 days and we will announce the total next week. If you would like to text to give, our text number is 347-744-9500. Text your dollar amount followed by the word RISE. So if you would want to give $10, you would do to that message, you would pop in that number, 10 space, the word RISE. We are so grateful and happy and to see that actually the original goal of the campaign to raise funds for these churches was $1.8 million. It has actually exceeded that now in the past week, which is powerful. As of the time that Notre Dame was burning, only $50,000 had been raised. And so we are grateful and thankful that as a community, we will stand in solidarity with our brothers and sisters and contribute $4,000 or more. Now, why this is also possible, why this is also important, because we as a community are in a position of rising. For many of you, if you know this already, and many of you don't, that we are in the process of looking for and securing our own building, our own space. And so as we talk about planting seeds, as we talk about this manifestation of seed, soil, and tree, what we get to do in consciousness is plant this seed for our brothers and sisters that are building and rebuilding, and guess what? This is actually supporting us in establishing the tree that it is that we're establishing in consciousness that is Celebration Spiritual Center that will exist beyond our lifetimes.
Yes.
And so I encourage you to just watch. Watch what happens. I encourage you to participate because the other thing is, again, wherever you plant your seed in good ground, we all benefit, we all eat. So get on this train. Decide what amount feels good for you above and beyond your normal donation. Again, we're doing this for 7 days. We will announce the total next week. 2,000 has already been established. We are raising 4,000 or more. If you go online, choose the Rise campaign pull down, or if you're texting, text your amount followed by the word Rise. And so with that, we're going to take a very joyous offering. And as we always affirm, because we know it's true, as we give, we receive. And so we affirm this truth. All the money that I use returns to me multiplied. In a never-ending cycle, of increase, and enjoyment. Call our ushers forward. Let's take a very joyous offering.
I give my love, more love comes rushing back to me. Thank you. I give my time, more time's available to me. Thank you. I give my treasure, doors are opening for me. As I give, I receive. This is all coming right back to me. I give my love, more love comes rushing back to me. Thank you. I give my time, more time's available to me. Thank you. I give my treasure, doors are opening for me. As I give, I receive. This is all coming right back to me. I give my love, more love comes rushing back to me. Thank you. I give my time, more time's available to me. Thank you. I give my treasure, doors are opening for me. As I give, I receive. This is all coming right back to me. 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 Come on. Coming right back to me. 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 Coming right back to me.
Let us extend our hands, and through our hands there is life deep, the life force that is you, Mother, Father, God. I'm so grateful today for the givers and for the gifts, for we know just as we extend our hands and open our hearts, what goes out has to come back. So we are so grateful today. We send our love to those in need. We send our understanding, our consciousness out, and we plant the seeds this week that will grow. Grow as we grow. Grow as our consciousness grows. Thank you, Mother, Father, God. We release these words back into the mind that says all is well, not only in our lives, but the lives of those all around the world. From this place of grace, I say amen. Amen.
Let's affirm together. I give my love.
More love comes rushing back to me. Thank you.
I give my time.
I give my time, more time's available to me.
I give my treasure.
I give my treasure, doors are opening for me.
As I give, quickly as we can for the God Talk. So we do encourage everyone, because we know you want to love on each other and talk to each other. If you could please take that out of the sanctuary so that we have the space that we need to reset for the God Talk. For those if you are interested, we invite you to stay with us for the God Talk. It's an opportunity to ask questions. It's an opportunity as you hear these teachings, these metaphysical teachings, and you want to know how to apply it to your life, or what is this stuff really all about, or you want to believe it, but it's not working in an area of your life. We're here to support you. We're happy to support you. No question is off limits. We love doing it.
We definitely do. And remember, registration closes on Monday night for our 50 Days to Fearless Living. Closes at 11:59 p.m. So love to have you in class on Wednesday night.
And the last thing.
Webinar.
Yes, we have the webinar tomorrow for 90 Days to Greatness. Learn how to become your own healer. But I also want to acknowledge, because I didn't acknowledge it during my sermon, that we do send our love, our thoughts, and our prayers to our brothers and sisters in Sri Lanka. For those of you that don't know, as we've been talking about the burnings of churches, there are about 160 people were killed today on Easter Sunday, a church in Sri Lanka. And so we send our love to them as well. We do not fully understand what's going on in consciousness. We do know that there's something happening, and always it is a call for love. So right here and right now, we answer the call. We answer the call.
And if anything has come up for you during this time, this message, this week, that you would like to write down and leave your worries on the altar, and let our prayer champion, Nick Bullitt, who opened us up this morning, let her hold in consciousness the truth for you. Because we do not beg and barter or bargain with God. We know that this Christ, this light, is what the Christ is, and it lives and it is alive in us. And we hold the truth of you. So write it down, leave your worries on the altar. And when you do that, what do we say?
All things are possible.
Now, all things are possible. Now every little thing is possible. 'Cause I know who I am.